So let's talk about something huge that went down on January 3rd, 2026. The US military pulled off this absolutely wild and, frankly, unprecedented operation right in the heart of Caracas, Venezuela. And their target? None other than President Nicolás Maduro himself. We're going to break down exactly how this incredible capture happened and really dig into the global shockwaves it sent rippling through the world.
And you don't have to take my word for how big this was. President Trump, speaking from Mar-a-Lago, didn't mince words. He called it an assault like people have not seen since World War II. So right from the top, you know this wasn't some quiet, sneaky extraction. No, this was a massive show of military force, and it set the stage for one of the most audacious military actions we've seen in a long, long time.
But here's the thing. The raid on Caracas didn't just happen out of the blue. Not at all. It was actually the explosive finale of a pressure campaign that had been building for months, escalating step by step in the seas and skies all around Venezuela.
Let's just walk through this timeline, because it tells a story. It all kicked off with airstrikes on boats that were supposedly trafficking drugs. Then, and this is a key legal step, Trump tells Congress there's a conflict, but with drug cartels, not with the nation of Venezuela. After that, they give the mission a name, Operation Southern Spear. And the final piece, a full-on naval blockade that started seizing oil tankers, basically choking off the government's money supply. You can see how each step just methodically tightened the noose.
So, what was the official reason for all this? The public justification really centered on one thing: the Cartel de los Soles, or the Cartel of the Suns. See, Washington was being very careful not to call this an invasion. Instead, they framed it as a gigantic law enforcement action. The argument was that Maduro wasn't just a dictator, he was the head of a narco-terrorist group, and they had a 2020 federal indictment to back it up.
Okay, so that's the buildup. Now let's get to the main event, the raid itself. In the wee hours of January 3rd, all those carefully laid plans were unleashed with, well, just stunning speed and precision.
Just before the sun came up, people in Caracas were jolted awake by the sound of explosions and the roar of low-flying aircraft. It wasn't long before smoke was seen rising from Fuerte Tiuna, which is the biggest military base in the whole country. The assault had begun.
And who was leading the charge? The tip of the spear, as they say, was the US Army's super elite DeltaForce. Their mission was built on months and months of careful intelligence work, including a huge piece of the puzzle, a CIA source deep inside Maduro's own government. You know, despite all the military buildup in the region, US officials were confident they had actually achieved total surprise.
As the helicopters carrying the assault force swooped in, they immediately started taking fire from the ground. But according to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the aircraft were tough enough to take it. They just pushed right through the resistance and got the operators on the ground right where they needed to be.
And this is it, the moment of truth inside the compound. The intel was solid, the element of surprise worked, and the operators were on the ground. The final push to get Maduro was happening right now. Inside, a team made up of US forces and even the FBI breached the building where Maduro is hiding. The whole idea was for the speed and the shock of it all to be completely overwhelming, leaving absolutely no time for anyone to put up a real fight.
You have to hear how President Trump described Maduro's last few seconds of freedom. Apparently, he was making a mad dash for a steel-reinforced safe room, but he never even made it to the door. Trump said, "Our guys were so fast, just too fast."
Faced with that kind of overwhelming force, Nicolás Maduro and his wife, Celia Flores, they just gave up. They surrendered. They were taken into custody right then and there, and within hours they were on a plane out of the country, headed to New York to face federal charges.
You know, this capture was really the end of a hunt that had been going on for years. And to understand just how high priority this was for the US government, look no further than the massive $50 million reward they had put on his head. So, the action movie part of the operation might have been over, but the political and diplomatic fallout? Oh, that was just getting started. The second the news broke, the world just exploded with a mix of shock, outrage, and in some places, even celebration. The international reaction was, wow, immediate, and sharply divided. Russia, China, and Iran were furious, calling it an act of aggression and a violation of sovereignty. But if you look closer to home, in the region, it was a different story. The Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, for instance, was all for it, basically saying the cartels had caused so much pain, this was justified. And if you think the world was divided, you should have seen the reaction right here in the US. The political lines were drawn in the sand instantly. Democrats, like Senator Schumer and Warner, called it reckless. They were asking, does this mean any big country can just go grab the leader of a smaller one? But Republicans, like Secretary Rubio and Senator Cotton, saw it differently. They said, look, this was basically an FBI arrest of fugitives, and you don't tell Congress beforehand because it would leak and put lives at risk.
Okay, so Maduro is in U.S. custody. From a purely tactical standpoint, the mission was a success, but it left behind a huge, chaotic power vacuum in Venezuela and a whole bunch of really tough, unanswered questions for everybody else.
And this led to what might be the most controversial part of this whole thing. President Trump announced that, for the time being, the U.S. was going to run the country to make sure there was a stable transition. That statement alone sent absolute shockwaves around the globe.
So now we're left with all these massive uncertainties. I mean, who's in charge in Venezuela now? Their constitution says the vice president, but can she actually govern? Then there's President Trump's focus on oil, which has a lot of people asking what America's real motives are. And of course, there are big fears of mission creep and setting this dangerous new precedent for the whole world.
When you boil it all down, the raid on Caracas, for all its military precision, seems to have traded one big problem for a whole set of new ones. Yes, the immediate threat of Nicolás Maduro might be gone, but the much, much larger question for Venezuela and for the rest of us is this: who or what is going to fill the massive void he left behind?